Welcome to B&D Photo and Film. My name is Sarmatar David. I'm a wedding photographer located in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And this podcast exists specifically to help wedding photographers and videographers and others who may be interested in joining the industry, if you will, get situated and navigate the wedding industry. And so the topic of this podcast has to do with specific lens, or rather the ideal lens lineup that one should own, and which one to start with, and the pros and cons of owning each one. So I'll give you a little bit of background as to what I started with. If you had listened to a few podcasts ago, you would know that I started my photography kits with a Canon 5D Mark I and a 50mm f1.8 at the time. That was the lens that came with it. I had bought it on the secondary market. It was already somewhat a dated camera, but I had bought it specifically to really practice photography, essentially, as it did not have a lot of, I could say, technical, a lot of tech built in. So it was still, rugged, and it was the ideal camera to learn the fundamentals of photography. Anyways, the point of the matter is, if I were to start a photography, specifically a wedding photography business today, that would not be the lens I would begin with. If I were starting today, I would likely save up and buy a 24-70. And hear me out. One of the difficult thing about starting a wedding photography business is really gathering all of the equipment that one needs to do a decent job. And so, although prime lenses are relatively cheaper than zoom lenses, they are very limiting in that you often have to switch them in and out of your camera bodies. And in a day like a wedding, things are moving fast, and you don't necessarily have time to constantly be doing that. So it slows you down in your workflow. And so I wouldn't recommend a prime lens to someone. If that's what you can get your hand on, by all means. But I would start with a mid-range, zoom lens, a 24-70, like I said, that has a f2.8 aperture. Yes, they are expensive, but on the secondary market, you can get them for half the price. And so that's what I would begin. And the reason why I suggest that is because when you're starting your kit, it's very expensive to buy multiple camera bodies. Although you should definitely if you're taking a paid gig, you should have more than one camera body, but it's just not financially possible when you're just getting off the ground. And so a zoom lens will let you have one camera body, one lens that can do it all, and then a set of batteries and SD card. And I think you can do a really good job with that. And once you have that lens, you can start upgrading. The next lens that I would get if I were, again, starting today would be a 20. But I'm an APS-C shooter, so a 24 f1.4 would be ideal, specifically to be able to, it's wide enough that you could use it throughout any, situation, and it essentially would let you really get, when you're, especially at night. I think it's a night lens. I would say it would make it easier for you to get really decent exposure when lighting situations are difficult, yet it's still wide enough to do it all. That would be my second lens if you want to get into the prime lens early enough in the game. And then the next lens that I would get would be a 85 equivalent, so a 50 f1.2 or 85 full frame. Those lenses, I would argue, take the absolute best photos I found when you have all the time in the world and you want to do portraits and you're not rushing. It is definitely the fastest lens one can get, and it really gives you the nicest bokeh possible. And clients really love the look of a 50 or 85 full frame equivalent. And so that would be my third lens. And then my fourth lens would be a 70 to 100, 70 to 200 f2.8 through the whole focal range. It will likely be your most expensive lens, but it is definitely a very important lens to own, specifically in the wedding industry, simply because you're gonna find yourself in situations where you're shooting in churches and wedding reception halls that will prevent you from being able to move up close enough for your couples to take decent photos. So you need that zoom range. It is very impractical because it's very big and heavy, so you're not going to be tempted to use it very often, and on top of that, it's going to be very expensive to own it. And you're not going to use it often because, again, like I said, there is very few situations that you need it. So it's likely going to live in your bag 90% of the time, but it's definitely a useful lens for those very few critical shots, like the first kiss, where you don't want to get in the way of the guests. You don't want to be standing up front at the church and taking pictures. Get the right lens. That's the one to do it. But that should be your fourth lens. Should you want to add a macro lens, which I don't find any use for, to be honest, but you can get a macro lens. I think they are ideal for when you're doing ring shots or detail shots, but I personally don't own one. I don't think I will purchase one, but that would be the fifth lens that you would need in this particular scenario. Now, if we can track back to the 70 to 200, or what I have or own, which is a 50 to 140, which is the same focal range, I guess, when you're talking about APS-C size camera bodies, I would argue that you probably should get a second body before you buy yourself a 70-200, just considering the fact that the frequency in which you're going to use that lens is going to be very minimal. But if I were starting today, in terms of getting my lens lineup, those are the ones that I would start. And the reason why I'm saying a zoom lens is the best thing to do, even though they may not produce the sharpest images or the nicest photos, is because they can do it all. And when you're getting started at the beginning and you're just trying to figure out what to do on the day, you don't want to be, worried about when should I change lens, when should I do this, when should I do that. And using two camera bodies or owning it can be financially difficult, and also it slows your process down. So get you a 24-70 or a 16 to 55 in the APS-C range, and I think you will be very satisfied with that range. Alright, if you like this kind of content, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll give you more tips and tricks for wedding photographers. Alright.